Sharks. 23-1 is their record at this juncture of the NHL season, the young season.
That's 20-3-1.
Right. 20 wins.
23-1.
41 points, I believe, by far the most in the NHL. They're on a 7-0-1 stretch. I mean, they're playing great hockey. Yeah, I mean, they're outscoring their opponents 35-15 in that last 8 games. I mean, Todd McClellan's the guy here. I mean, maybe Detroit fans around the area are familiar with that name. He was the top assistant under Mike Babcock last year for the champion Red Wings. He goes out west to San Jose, brings that success with them, best team in hockey. Plus, they bring in all these new pieces. They got the old Rob Blakes on that team now. All these guys in there, and they're just
the perfect mix between young players and veterans. You know, you have your young guys, you know, your studs in Devin Stedeguchi, who, you know, top draft pick, comes in and just immediately becomes a star.
Put him next to Joe Thornton.
Guys like, right. And then your veterans, you know, your guys like Thornton, your guys like, you know, Patrick Marleau, your guys like Rob Blake, you know, even Roenick, you know, a guy who used to be such a stud, provides that veteran leadership, and is just kind of chilling there at the bottom of that lineup.
The best name in hockey, Jonathan Cichon. He's injured. He's injured right now. He's not even playing.
But still, there's so much. Dan Boyle, one of the best defensemen in the league, who constantly gets overlooked. And then, you know, your younger players, like I mentioned, Ryan Clough, Milan Mikhailiuk.
How about the goaltender, though? Nabokov has been looking great. I remember 2 years ago when they had that great run in the Stanley Cup playoffs. Nabokov was awesome. He's looking pretty similar to that form.
And they have a pretty good backup in Brian Boucher. And, you know, we've talked on this show about the Michigan hockey team. You know, when you have 2 goalies, how do you determine which one of them plays? With Michigan, it seems like, oh, it's 2 semi-weak goalies. When you have 2 stud goalies, play them interchangeably because, my God, you keep those guys fresh.
Keep them fresh, yep.
You know.
Well, I mean, you mentioned Michigan hockey. Let's just go ahead and jump right into that, Danny.
Okay.
You know, up and down season right now. They're 9-7. They just came out of the College Hockey Showcase out in the Midwest. They first played Minnesota, the #1 team in the country, went into Minnesota, their home building, and stomped them 6-3.
Here's a fun stat, Chris. 3 times this year, the University of Michigan hockey team has followed up a 5+ goal performance with 0.
Yeah, and
I just don't understand how that happens.
What are they doing? Just wasting all their gas in the first game?
I honestly don't know what happens.
Yeah, I mean, Wisconsin just shuts them out 3-0 on Saturday night. Billy Sauer's in goal then, so of course, you know, I'm going to say, well, let's get rid of Billy Sauer. I've been saying that for 3 years now. But I mean,
Sauer played well. I mean,
yeah, he didn't. I'm not going to even argue that. I wouldn't fault the guy.
You know, you look at Sauer's record this year. You see the 2-6, and you say, you know, that's a terrible record. But he's only in reality, he's played one bad game, and that one bad game was a game he ended up getting pulled in Boston against BU for Hogan, who was equally inefficient. I mean, they're essentially the same goalie. They're both decent, average goalies.
And now, big series coming up at home, and then in East Lansing on Saturday night against
Michigan State.
The Spartans. That's always a big weekend, so we'll see who's in goalie
Chris,
on Friday.
The thing that's frustrating is that every step forward this team takes, they take another one back.
Yeah.
Whether it's you know, finally exploding for, you know, you sweep Ohio State. You know, you get a good split on the road in Alaska, which is always a tough place to play, and then you come back
Western Michigan.
And you lose to Western Michigan at home.
And then
they take a step forward and they put 5 up on the road against Western Michigan, and you say, okay, they figured some stuff out. And then they get swept by Miami.
Yep.
And then they go and beat Minnesota. And then they take the step back against Wisconsin. So it's just a constant back and forth.
Let's get some momentum and keep going the same direction, huh?
Hey, speaking of momentum and going somewhere, how about the Michigan basketball team, Chris Cichon? This is a team that you have not spoken so highly about, so I'm going to let you take it away. Will they have you eating your words?
Yeah, you know, sure, I'll eat my words. They beat UCLA. Congratulations. By the way, it is November. It does not matter. This win is not going to get them automatically into the NCAA tournament.
Not at all.
So what is the really point? And plus, they lost the championship game in that tournament, so they didn't bring home any hardware. So no point. Plus, I think UCLA was way overrated. They lost a ton of stuff, and Kevin Lowe and Mba Mute down low, so their front court is just basically pretty bare. And then, you know, let me add to this. You know, as good as they played against UCLA, what about the performance a week later against Savannah State at home? They had to come back 20 points, and they needed overtime to beat Savannah State, Danny.
Oh,
Savannah State.
Absolutely.
So you're telling me this is an NCAA tournament-bound team?
No, I don't think they're a tournament-bound team yet, but I think it's definitely a step in the right direction. And, you know, you were critical of Beeline when he first came in here, and this is a team that undoubtedly is going in the right direction. And you know, when you can take a 10-22 year from last year, and come back with the exact same players and beat a team like UCLA in neutral territory in Madison Square Garden on national television.
It's a great win.
It's a great win for this
program.
First
win over a ranked team in 11 years.
They're going to have their hiccups, but this was a game last year. You know, last year's team had hiccups, whether it's losing to Harvard.
The whole season was a hiccup last year.
Or losing to Northwestern and Penn State, you know, the bottom feeders of the Big Ten in conference. And the last season wasn't a huge, you know, yeah, it was a hiccup, but they were not a good basketball team. This year's team played a terrible game and won. And I think that's important as far as character is concerned. I think it's important as far as team morale. To have lost that game going into a stretch that includes Maryland and Duke would have been terrible. They got the W. They got their bad game out of the way. And now, I mean, obviously, yeah, they're going to have to fix some things. But a win is a win. They're 5-1. They're moving in the right direction. And you have to look at that as small little steps toward building a good basketball
They need is the other
program.
guys to help Manny Harris and Deshaun Sims out. Harris, close to 23 a game.
Laval Lucas Perry coming in winter semester is going to help this team.
It's not going to happen by one guy.
I'll talk about that later in the show. It's not going to be one guy, but we'll see.
Stu Douglas and Novak, those kids are looking pretty good. I like these guys.
They're a young basketball team. They'll get better.
Shout out, fellas. Shout out.
We'll get better, too. We promise to be much better after the commercial break. Chris, Danny, stay tuned. Commercials.